Hey there guys, how's it going? Reaper here, and I'm back with a new painting video, and we're doing another Reaper Bones mini, as it was essential and is a strange mini. It's called Gutrags, a Stitch Golem, which I essentially translated to it's a flesh golem, because I think that's probably the most fitting thing it could be for D&D, as nothing else really works with the look of it. But we primed it in the grey, as we always do, and I start off doing the actual bits of skin that are stitched together, which I've used kobold skin for that. And it's just a case of, this model is lots of different pieces of stuff stitched together. So I figured if I do it all skin, it's going to look strange. So I've added like a bit of cloth here, or a bit of leather stitched to it as well. So it looks like it's just something is stitched over flesh, which kind of probably makes it scarier than anything, which is the idea. There we go, that's the end of the cobalt skin. Then we move on to another set of the patches, which I do in hemp rope, which now I've shaken it up more and I've added a small ball bearing into the bottle, as Army Painters paints don't have that, and it just helps mix that paint up so much nicer when you shake it, and it's coming out brilliant now. Because the first time I used this, it was incredibly thin, it just didn't work. It required about 8 layers. It was a nightmare to use. Whereas this one is just squeeze it out, thin it a little bit now. I can actually thin it, which is a good start. And it just goes on nicely. And didn't actually require a second layer, strangely enough. The cobalt skin does require another layer, which I don't record, but it just happens in between colours. As I do it all, and then while something's drying, I'll go over one that needs doing, just so that I'm not sitting around waiting for paint to dry. As I find that's probably the most tedious and boring part of painting a miniature, is waiting for the paints to dry in between layers. But if you do, like I've done the skin now and I've moved straight onto this, the skin is still drying. I haven't waited for that to dry to do that, which is probably the most important part. And that will be it for the hemp rope. Then we move on to the final part. No, this is not the final part, sorry. This is almost the final part. This is Army Painter's leather brown. No, that's the end of the leather brown. Then we move on to the last of the stitches now, is Army Painter's Army Green. And it just finishes off the model and it adds a bit of colour, because everything else is just a shade of brown, essentially. I feel like colour is something that's essential for this, otherwise it would just look bland. And there we go, that's the end of the Army Green. Then we move on to the metallics part. I didn't want to use a shiny metallic, as this is the sort of model that wouldn't be shiny, so I've gone with rough iron. It's still metallic, but it's nice and dark. And he's got, the hand is a bit strange. I'm not 100% sure if it should all be the metallic colour, but it made sense when I was looking at it, so I've gone with that. But like with all Reaper Bones models, they're open to interpretation. You could paint these any way you want. This could be pink and purple, it wouldn't make any difference. As long as it looks right for what you want to use it for, that's all that matters. And that's it, pretty much. That's, got the model there. That is the last of the metallic parts. And then we move on to the longest part of painting this model, which is Army Painter's Skeleton Bone. And in between each piece of thing stitched together are the actual stitches on this model. So I've grabbed some skeleton bone and I've just started slowly colouring them all in as you go around the model. And his eyes are stitched closed, so it took me a while to get them right, as it was quite difficult to sort of get the brush in and only get the stitch part. Because of the way the eye is shaped, it didn't work how it was supposed to. But eventually you get it done. It's just something you have to take care about, and the wash definitely helps afterwards. And there we go. That's the end of the very long highlighting stage. And then I do come back again and just touch up the bits that well, it's not really the bits I've missed, it's the bits that I've got other colours on. I've just come back with cobalt skin just to blot it back up. As when you see it now, it looks really thinned and it hasn't gone on properly. So this is the second layer, which normally I don't record, but for some reason I have the footage for it, so I've thrown it in. There we go, that's the skin blocked back up, and that's all of the base colours done now. Then we just move on to the wash, and it's just one wash whole model. It is Army Painter's Strong Tone. Because I didn't want it to look clean. This should not be a clean model. Like, it is skin stitched together. So it's not going to be clean, it's going to be very dirty, very grimy. And Strong Tone gives that effect on skin quite well as gives a decent wash on all the clothing parts. There we go, that's the end of the wash. As you can see, the model looks so much nicer now. But with wash, I also guarantee you have to let it dry. If you don't let it dry, it will ruin the model when you start painting the highlights. That's the only layer I would always let dry, and I will happily sit and leave. It takes roughly 20 minutes to half hour to dry, so it's not that bad. Like, in that time I can just go prime other models and things. But now we come back to the highlight stage. And the only part I highlight is the skin, as the rest of it sort of just worked with the wash, whereas the skin I wanted to bring back up to it's actually a corpse pale colour, which is the colour I've used. Because the skin is dead, so it shouldn't look vibrant as fleshy. It should look more like sort of pale leather, essentially, is what it should look like. But I'll grab some corpse pale, and I'm just... anything that's not a recess is essentially being painted in here. Just to lighten it up, and it makes it pop out a bit more compared to the actual clothing that it's got. And because the paint's so thin, it actually helps with the wash coming through slightly, so it keeps this grimy look that it should have, but still highlights it up to a next level, which is nice. That's the important part about thinning paints. So if that wasn't thinned down, it would just cover the whole thing, and you'd have a block colour of corpse pale, which wouldn't look that great. There you go, that's the last bit of Corpse Pail. And then we're moving on to Army Painter's Gunmetal, which is just any metallic part. I've just sort of done the edge highlights, and with the sword I've done down the top just to make it look like light is shining off of this thing. Like, it should be rusty like the rough iron is, but it's still metallic, so it will have a good shine to it, which is what this sort of highlight does. And it just changes it from it's just one block color, because the wash on a metallic like this doesn't really do anything, so you have to highlight up in order to make it look that just a little bit better. There we go. That is essentially the end of the model. I've just moved on to standard base, which is Army Painter's Matte Black, as that is the only colour I use for bases these days. Cool. Any black works, but I have a lot of Army Painter's black, so I just use that. There we go, that's the end of the model. Here you can see a more close-up version with a nice bit of detail on the model, and it is a really nice model to paint. I actually enjoyed it quite much. But that's the end of the video, guys, so cheers for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.